Well, I guess it had to happen eventually. Our reigning manager of the month, Unai Emery, experiencing his first ever 0-0 draw in the Premier League, which is kind of quirky considering the manager is coming up on 100 Premier League matches in charge. Irritating game, yes, but certainly not our worst away performance by a long shot. I have an exciting unveil for this show's sponsor coming up a little bit later, but first let's get into it. Everton 0, Aston Villa 0. I'm wearing this throwback Adidas jersey in honor of Franz Beckenbauer, who rightfully deserves his place in the heavenly training ground with Pele and Maradona. He deserves to be there, and they would say he deserves to be here with us because he was a pioneer in this sport and one of the few guys to win a World Cup both as a player and as a manager. And, you know, this jersey does get me dreaming about the possibilities of this Adidas licensing and merchandising or potentially sponsorship agreement, because it extends so far beyond just the performance apparel, but also into the casual stuff like this, the throwback stuff, which excites me. I watched the Everton game twice, and I actually think I was angrier on second viewing. Normally, I'm emotional or upset the first time around, but then I get a sober second reality in watching it again. Not this time, because we were playing Sean Dyche's Burnley team on Sunday, which means it was scrappy, ugly, and abrasive. And remember what I said about a team reflecting its manager? Well, scrappy, ugly, and abrasive absolutely beautifully encapsulates Sean Dyche and his brand of football. And I'm sorry, but Everton fans should be very worried. Dyche didn't get to suffer the indignation of relegation with Burnley a couple of years ago, but the damage had already been done. And with more points deductions coming and the inability to spend, I hate to tell you this, but with a new stadium, $750 million build on the horizon, relegation to the championship would be worse than catastrophic. And I simply cannot believe that the legacy of all that bad, self-inflicted spending is that team that we saw on Sunday. That is what is breathtaking to me. On the positive side, we've yet to concede in 2024. And yes, I realize we've only played 2 championship teams. Oh, behave. Everton's had more points deductions than we've had red cards. Unfortunately, we've only managed to score once in those 2 games, and I am used to the fans' reactions by now from games like the one on Sunday. What caught me a little bit off guard was match commentator Jim Proudfoot saying at full time, well, those are 2 valuable points lost in Aston Villa's title chase. Oh, really? Are we doing this now? Setting Villa up now to fail later? My buddy Joe uses this analogy all the time when it comes to financial planning, but I think it translates beautifully to how I think a club should conduct itself in terms of growing and building. Imagine yourself climbing the stairs. That is progression into the future. And while you're climbing those stairs, you're playing with a yo-yo. You know, the toy from the 70s. Sometimes the yo-yo's up here, sometimes it's down here, sometimes it's right in the middle, which represents the season. Sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low, sometimes you're neutral. But so long as you keep climbing those stairs, you are progressing. And all I see from Aston Villa, truthfully, is progression. The yo-yo is going up and down, and it was in the middle on Sunday, but we are still climbing those stairs this way. Samir Gaby, our senior correspondent, was among the throngs of traveling Villa support who have become spoiled at Goodison Park of late, but that was the last league game between these 2 teams there. And we clearly missed Emi Buendia, who has hit the target in consecutive seasons at Goodison. But I welcome you officially to the Holy Trinity show as I recount the 3 biggest issues or moments that defined Everton 0, Villa 0. We were blanked on Merseyside this season, but at least in this game there were chances to score. And one stat that I found interesting was successful dribbles. I always felt like we were most dangerous once we navigated through that first wave. And in this game, there were times when we dribbled through that first wave rather than passing there. And once we got moving in the middle third, that's kind of our thing. And we were only caught offside once. This is a bonus stat compared to Everton's 5, but sadly that one turned out to be significant. Just on the disallowed goal, it stole 4 minutes of our lives that we'll never get back, and like VAR does, steals the joy and passion of every single goal that is scored now. But that was the biggest issue from the disallowed goal, was how long it took to get there. Dermot Gallagher, referee apologist, claims that Paul Tierney, the VAR, could not find a single frame where both the ball, when it was passed, and Leon Bailey were in the same frame, which is weird because I had that replay on my feed. And I also found it very strange that they were showing the phase after Bailey received the ball, looking at Clement Longley, whether he was somehow interfering with the line of sight of the goalkeeper or whether he committed a foul, all those kinds of things. But according to Gallagher, that was just stalling to try to get the right frame to show that Leon Bailey was offside in that first phase. Mark Clattenburg, the ex-Premier League official, was refreshingly critical of the whole process and said it should have been done and dusted in 30 seconds as Clement Longley fouled Mykolenko, and that would have rendered the offside moot in any event. And it's just too bad because, I think John McGinn's ball back out wide was intended for Douglas Luiz, and he got it woefully wrong, and it ran all the way through to Bailey. Might not have mattered in the end. It's just such a shame because that was a strike worthy of winning a game. I don't know about you, but I felt as though our midfield struggled to cope with Onana, Doucouré, and Garner at times. And that led to a lot of, especially early in this game, fouls by Douglas Luiz and Boubacar Kamara, many of which I didn't really agree with. But this lingering concern that we are missing a more physically imposing central midfielder persists for me. And it's clear now that Leander Dendoncker is not in the long-term future plans. So can we significantly upgrade Leander Dendoncker? And I mean significantly, but find somebody with similar physical attributes. Like, can Monchi find us Rodri before he becomes Rodri? I'm thinking about starting a new segment on this show called Duran Drama because it seems like every week there's some kind of news or rumor involving John Duran. This time it was back home in Colombia where he did a TV interview, and some of the comments might have been taken out of context and he might have been provoked as well because that's the game over there. But the bottom line is this kid is extremely immature, and I think he's being badly advised, and that's not a good combination. Great example from Sunday. I mean, here's a guy who's not been with the team for 5 minutes. He's not won over his manager, and that means he's probably not won over his teammates either. Yes, he scored a couple of goals, but that's his job. That's what we paid for, and there is undeniable talent there. He's just missed a chance, and here he could be seen close up saying, "Give me the ball, pass me the ball, pass me the ball, pass me the ball." Now, if he irritates me, I'm going to make a pretty good assumption that he's irritating his teammates and probably the manager. And we all think, oh, hey, our problems will be solved if we move over there. The grass is always greener over there. All we need to do is move. But I'm here to tell you, unless that kid grows up mentally, the same problems that are occurring right now are also going to occur over there, in which case he will develop a bad reputation. We're looking at Mario Balotelli 2.0 here, in my opinion. That's my concern. And in that case, better to have him somewhere else. Before we get into the top 3 key issues or moments that defined this game, 24/7 Services, the title sponsor of this program, to whom I'm eternally grateful, has an exciting reveal to finally share with you. Yes, this is the worldwide unveiling of 24/7 Services' new corporate brand. Paul and his team wanted something vibrant, electric even, and of course modern, that was less industrial but still paid homage to the company's roots, which was founded on roofing. So this vibrant electric green will now be seen everywhere, from the company's signage and clothing to, most importantly, their fleet of vehicles, which you will soon start to see on the motorways between Birmingham, Manchester, and Liverpool. And I love this new look So does Paul Handsaker, who was at Goodison Park with his trusty number 2 Brad. And this is just the start of many other exciting new revelations and goodies that we'll be unveiling through 24/7. And so it's time to retire this spinning logo and replace it with this spinning logo, which really does pop and catch the eye, which is kind of the point. And if you need 24/7 services, even in an emergency, I've put their numbers in the description of this video. Now, Villa's updated badge may not be as dramatic, but based on the leaks we saw recently, it caused a bit of a stir, and there is so much happening in the world of Chris Heck and all the commercial deals, including Adidas and potentially shooting material for an Amazon All or Nothing type series, and all that stuff is really significant, and Chris Heck has taken it on the chin from a lot of supporters, which I don't agree with. I think it's extremely unfair, and when people are saying to him, go back to America, Chris Heck, what you're really saying is, Nassif Sawiris and Wes Edens, you don't know what you're doing, and I fundamentally disagree with that. So we're going to talk all things commercial in my next show, which will come out soon. Big issue number 3, clueless Coot. That's now 2 away games recently refereed by David Coote that he lost complete control of. And you would hope that Aston Villa would have learned from that Brentford game to not allow a team of wind-up merchants to get under their skin, because you know that would have been part of the plan under Sean Dyche. But they did get under Villa's skin, partially because the referee lost control of the game. The stuff that was happening off the ball in this match was unbelievable to me. And when you see mass comings together repeatedly, and then all that niggly off-the-ball stuff that went unpunished, well, that comes entirely down to a referee not having control of the game. All that players, managers, and us fans ask for is a consistent application of the laws of the game within the game itself, and ideally from week to week, so that we know kind of what we're going to get, and the Premier League is just not providing that at the moment. And I realize that is hard because flashpoints in games are inevitable. But it's during those flashpoints when referees need to be firm and decisive. And too many times in this game, David Coote looked completely indecisive and lost, frankly, in which case he lost the game. And in those occasions, he also got very little support from the equally inept Paul Tierney, video assistant referee. I dabbled in refereeing. I've always been fascinated by the craft and the application of laws in the game. So I'm going to go on a deep dive here, because I'll give you a couple of examples of how the laws are not applied equally within the same game. This is late in the first half, and Diego Carlos subtly blocks off Mykolenko, which actually gets called right away. Some referees may turn a blind eye to this, but it's called, and it denies Villa a pretty good chance to fizz the ball in across the goal mouth. Fast forward to the second half, and Seamus Coleman had some kind of an issue with Yuri Tielemans that kept boiling over. Seamus Coleman just goes and blocks off Tielemans. You cannot do this in a game. And it progresses, and Tielemans is ultimately the one who ends up getting called with the foul and getting booked. Same thing happens with Tarkowski. And he and Ollie Watkins had quite a battle in this game, which stems initially from the very first aerial duel of the game, which Watkins wins, but apparently unfairly. I think he's 100% entitled to go for this ball. His arms are down, and Tarkowski gets clipped on the side of the head and has to be treated. Watkins gets called for the foul, and he's booked. But later in the game, watch as Tarkowski pulls down Watkins, unadulterated. And then later, as the sequence plays on, he bumps Watkins in the box. When was this allowed? Never. And of course, the retaliator always gets called. And this is where Villa has to learn and be disciplined. But it's Watkins who loses his cool, throws Tarkowski down, and he gets called for the foul. That too denies a Villa opportunity. But those weren't even the most egregious examples. The Tarkowski tackle on Moussa Diaby was naughty, and any central defenders know exactly what his aim is here. He was going out and making sure that he was going to get at least a nick on the ball, but then he carried through with force and left a scissor tackle on Moussa Diaby. I don't remember when those tackles were legal ever. Does that remind you of a tackle, by the way? Ben Mee versus Wesley. Well, Tarkowski is Ben Mee 2.0, and Everton is Burnley 2.0 under Sean Dyche Ball. And by the way, just before that, Moussa Diaby could have gone down when he got a nick from Mikolenko in the box. He decided not to and was more honest than John Duran was against, well, actual modern Burnley. And I realize there's a moral dilemma there that is a discussion for another show, but sometimes you got to pick your poison. But Tarkowski was not finished chopping down Aston Villa players. No, later in that same half, he goes after Alex Moreno. Now, football people can recognize this from a mile away. He was tangled up with at the edge of the box, didn't get a call, and the pink mist went into his eyes. He saw an opportunity to go and take down Alex Moreno premeditatively, and all he had to make sure of was he got a piece of the ball first, and that's what the defense always is. Well, I got the ball. That is absolute bullshit. That is no longer a defense, and it hasn't been for a very long time. That is the biggest misnomer in football. Well, I got a piece of the ball. Now, no foul given on that challenge, which I thought was reckless and with excess force, but he was booked for some reason. I don't know why. We don't get to find out these things. And then he protested, and he continued protesting for too long, in my opinion. You're not allowed to do that anymore with referees. This is where David Coote and Paul Tierney, for that matter, and most Premier League referees simply do not have a clue. They look at the game through the eyes of IFAB and the very rigid application of laws, rules, regulations, procedures, etc., etc. I used to say at the federation level here in Canada, we need to force referees to play football in a league. They need to play in a league to see what competition is like and know what it feels like to get fouled or to have a 50-50 ball with an opponent. Then maybe they can better understand the premeditative nature of some of these tackles. Big issue number 2, brilliant back line. I was really impressed with our back four on Sunday for a number of reasons, and I realized that it's not the most challenging opponent because Everton would be fortunate to score in a brothel at this stage. Even getting a shot on target for them is somewhat of a minor miracle these days. But still, it was the way that we controlled and picked our moments to move the ball that really impressed me. Now, Pau Torres not being in the squad on Sunday, despite the fact that Emery told us last week he was back to full training, was a bit concerning for me. And I really do wonder because Clement Longley has said, I want to play first-team football. I don't want to sit on the bench, which is fair. But if this was a cup final, would Pau Torres have been ready to step in? And it's interesting that here we are, and Longley is getting this opportunity with less than 2 weeks left now in the January transfer window. I'm not saying that Unai Emery's holding Pau Torres back, but the timing still is very interesting for me because we need Longley. Mings is too far away still. Clement Longley won all of his duels, both ground and in the air. He was 1 for 1 in successful dribbles. He wriggled out really nicely, actually, to drive the ball forward. And he had 2 interceptions and 2 recoveries. But generally, he just has such poise and class on the ball. I feel very secure now when he's in our lineup. Same with Diego Carlos. I thought he was solid again. He had a blocked shot early on in this game. And the reason why we brought him in was for his range of passing. And a couple of times he did bypass the midfield entirely by dropping a ball into Ollie Watkins. Didn't lead to a goal this time, but it will one day. And his only real error was a bad touch, which then led to him throwing the ball away and earning a yellow card. And then Alex Moreno was electric at times for me. What a shame that the goal was chalked off because the strike was as superb as his first touch. And what a signing that was a year removed now, because he looks like he's back up to full speed. On the ball, he is so unpredictable. He doesn't telegraph what he's going to do, which must make defending him a nightmare. Sometimes I wonder if he even knows what he's going to do. And then Ezri Konsa, well, he's just Ezri Konsa, whether he's playing on the right or in the middle. He's a Rolls-Royce defender who's getting better and better. So that was a shared clean sheet among the group and hopefully a platform to build off of, because winning things starts with defending. And incredibly, the last time Everton scored against us, it was a Luca Dean own goal, ironically. And the number one big moments that defined Everton 0, Villa 0, Debu's denials. Yes, he didn't have an awful lot to do, but in a way that actually made his exploits at the end of the first half even more impressive. And this was after getting a pretty good spike to the chest from Onana, after he left a pass a little bit short for Boubacar Kamara. Onana, another guy, by the way, that doesn't need an invitation to go flying in studs first. So thankfully, he recovered from that, because that could have been nasty. But despite the fact that we had more possession, more territory, more attempts at target, unquestionably, the best chance of the game for either side fell to Everton. And once again, our World Cup winning goalkeeper was equal to the task. Calvert-Lewin scored from a similar type breakaway to help lead Everton past us in the Carabao Cup. And I wonder, though, when you're sprinting in 40 yards clean through, whether that's too much time to think rather than allowing your natural striking instincts to guide you. And I also wonder again, when you're bearing down on Big Emmy in black, are you overthinking what your plan is? Now, Emi Martinez goes full-on hockey goalie type save, very reminiscent of the save from late in extra time in the World Cup final. But that was all about remaining calm and patient, because if he bites, he helps the shooter make up his own mind. And that wasn't even the end of the sequence. After a couple of fist pumps, he's forced to drop down and push a deflected shot around the post. That was the harder of the two saves, and if he doesn't make that one, well, then the first one would have been meaningless. And this is why I feel like we have a chance to win every single game, because of this guy. And this is why we have to stop talking about a title challenge and focus on getting into the top four and those Champions League places. Because if we're playing Champions League football next year, Emi Martinez is for sure staying with us. And Emi Martinez in the Champions League with penalties a reality in the later rounds, I like our chances. It's obviously a concern that our away record, and particularly the record against bottom six sides, is not the best. You know, it's clearly an area which requires investigation and analysis, and the common theme is our inability to navigate a low block and be more ruthless, in my opinion, without just, waiting to capitalize on an opponent's error, making something happen, making the opponent make a mistake by being technically better is what we have to aspire to next. And Unai Emery made reference to that. And that's why we can learn from these games and continue climbing up that stairway, even if the yo-yo is stuck in the middle. Up next, the fourth round FA Cup tie at Stamford Bridge on a Friday night against Chelsea. And once again, my first question is, how will Aston Villa prioritize these competitions, given that Newcastle United is coming to Villa Park just 4 days later for an odd Tuesday night fixture? And I think I do know where the priorities lie, given the current circumstances. However, I fully expect that most of our key contributors will somehow feature in both of these games. Meanwhile, you look at Chelsea and their table position, their only route to Europe may be via a cup win. So potentially this is a more important game for them, given the scrutiny on their spending right now, and their spending demands European football of any kind. As I said on our last show, our last two visits there have been victories with clean sheets, and there's this maturity to Aston Villa right now that may cause Poch's young stars some problems. And they're missing some key players, most notably probably Nicholas Jackson, who's at AFCON, but also goalkeeper Sanchez is out, and Reece James is a steady head that they're missing. It's still a formidable roster with potential, even if it was put together rather haphazardly by the freewheeling and big spending Todd Bowley, but let's wait and see. I would love to be in the hat for round 5 because, as I've said too many times on this show, it's just been too long for us in this competition. We have apparently dotted the I's and crossed the T's of a right back from Serbia who's only just turned 18 and who's being compared with Trent Alexander-Arnold, yes please. And rather than go into that deal in specific today, I'm going to wait till the end of the month and do a whole transfer roundup show, because when you consider Kessler Hayden's recall, the recent sale of Finn Azaz, Big Tim, where's he going to land? And of course, the hopeful transfers out of Callum Chambers and Bertrand Traore, I just feel like over the next couple of weeks, there's going to be some FFP housekeeping to deal with, and I want to talk about it at the end of the month when it's all official. We are suddenly being hit by snow here. Not sure about you, so there's a lot of inside activities occurring here in the parlor, Holy Trinity World headquarters in Delta, British Columbia. Lots of roasts, lots of soups, stock being made even, and the odd bit of tipple. And I'm going to raise this glass as I close things out for this show, to Brian Prescott, who was a dedicated viewer of this show, but is now a new Holtender in the sky. I've talked about Brian on this show in the past, and I wish my best to son Gary and Brian's missus. Stay cozy, stay warm with the ones you love, and of course, and as always, up the mighty villa.